gone,
Yeah,
what's the either
we'll
the
do
thing you're
that.
most looking forward to, or what's the first thing you want to try to do?
I like that. It looks like we're live. I'm excited to be here, and we got Adam with us, and we're gonna wait for a few people to populate and show up, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. But we're so glad you're here. Yeah,
It'll be good.
and Adam, and I guess we'll try to we'll try to wait for us to be able to hear uh, for our audience to get here, but we'll hear from them too. But I'll hear from you when this isolation thing. I don't know about you, but it's been driving me crazy, and
Yeah, literally.
and I know you know me. I don't do well by myself. It I have to be around people, and I guess that the question is, what's the first thing you're going to do whenever they say, you know what, there's no restrictions, you can do whatever you want, you're free, you know,
Right.
go and do whatever. What's the first thing
Yeah,
you're
be
going to do?
fruitful. Yeah. Oh man. I was thinking about that, and there are some things that are horrible to say that I can't wait to get out in public and be able to go to the movies.
Oh
But
yeah,
I miss the movies. I miss a
you're a
big
movie
movie theater
junkie.
screen. I'm a cinephile, I think is the word for it, and so I have missed being able to go to the movies. And that's not very socially interactive though. So that's like you want to be set free so you can go sit in a dark room and not talk. Like, can't you do that at home?
Yeah.
But the movie experience is a big deal for me. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to there's still a lot of outdoor kind of activities that we can do, and I enjoy the outdoors. I've been walking a lot, going to some parks and things, but just being having to do all that by myself, has not been the most fun. So
No,
I'm looking forward to
absolutely
traveling a little
not.
bit more.
It's
Yeah.
terrible. And I know for me, it's been hard. I enjoyed, and I said this last week for those who know this. I really enjoyed, during the week going to the bank, and I know that's weird because you can mobile deposit now. It's so
Right.
easy. But what
Yeah.
I've done is, I've built up some relationships, and I'm
Hmm.
on Facebook with them if they ever watch. Hi, but they're not watching, probably,
They might be.
and they might be. But it's so fun because I've built up that relationship, and now it's you go through the drive-through, and I see them through the glass, and they'll all come to the
Right.
glass and be like, "Hi," but
Ah.
you know they're going insane. You know,
Yeah, they
we're
are.
all going insane, and it's so. I guess those who are watching, what's the first thing you plan to do whenever you're able to get out? And if we hear from you guys, we'll give you a shout out. And but after that, we'll go ahead and get started in just a few minutes with our topic. After a few more people jump in.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, are people sitting at home like plotting this stuff out, or is it just gonna, they're just like, I can't wait till it's done and I can just go out and not think about it, or like, are people sitting down and making plans?
Well,
I'm curious about that.
I know my wife, and she's doing grad school right now, and otherwise, I want to think she would be watching. But she posted something, and it's totally her. It's I can't go anywhere. Well, would you go anywhere if we weren't isolated?
Anyway.
And because she likes to, she reads her book. She likes to stay at home and kind of have her time. And she's like,
Hmm.
but I want to have the choice to do
That's right.
that.
I was fine with it until they told me that I couldn't go out, and now
Yeah,
I want to go out.
and now I want to go
Like
out, even if it's just to nowhere. Today I
my
woke up.
wife, not so much. Autumn is like, nope, I haven't missed anybody. I'm fine. I don't care. Somebody was like, I'm even starting to miss the people that I don't like. And Autumn said, no.
Joshua here, Joshua Fowler. I had him on the other week, and he's in Baton Rouge, and he said just going out to eat and sitting in a restaurant.
Yeah,
I'm
like
tired
we've
of
got
I'm
our,
tired of takeout.
takeout is terrible. We've got our Sunday after church, after worship service, we've got this one place that we go, and it's a Chinese restaurant and stuff. And we haven't been,
I've been.
in a month and a half.
That place
It's
is
killing
good.
me.
I think I
It
know a
is
place.
good,
Oh
yeah.
man, that place is great. Well, it looks like we have a good bit of people here. We're going to go ahead and get started. So
Cool.
I'm going to start this audio track, and then we'll go ahead and get going. Welcome to the Crossways podcast, where we discuss how we can walk in the way of the cross. I'm your host, Jonathan Germany, coming at you live from Holly Hill Church of Christ. And tonight we're talking about the fruit of the Spirit in the first trait of love. And I'm honored to have my good friend here, Adam Richardson. And we're going to be talking about this tonight, and I hope you'll be involved in that. But we'll go ahead and get started. And Adam, how are you doing?
I am doing fantastically. I'm excited to be sitting in a virtual living room with my good friend Jonathan Germany, because we haven't had a chance to do something like this in a while. So this has brightened my day.
It's been great, and I'm glad that you're here. You know, I miss being able to be down the road from you, but at the same time, I'm very happy where I am for those who are watching. And we're glad to be able to still do this virtually. It's amazing that just a few years ago, this was possible, but it was clunky. And even beyond that, this wasn't as seamless as it can be today. And so I'm excited to do this. But as we discuss the fruit of the Spirit, and for those who watched the 3-minute kind of Thursday 3, the promo for this, I kind of wonder, do we really understand what love really is? You know, when we talk about the fruit of the Spirit, and we say, you know, love, joy, peace, patience, and we sing the song, you know, love is kind of a word that we kind of overuse. You know, when I think of ways we use the word love, you know, I love milkshakes, and I also love my wife. And if those two things are comparable, then are the same level, we have a serious problem. Now, there are times my wife may say, well, I know how much you love milkshakes, and that's another story for another time.
That could be high praise.
It could be, yeah, and she could be questioning something, you know. But right. I guess the question is, do we overuse the word love?
Yeah,
are there different loves, or different levels? I guess is that kind of just our vernacular, kind of just the way things are, or have we kind of taken advantage or maybe take it for granted?
Well, I mean, you know, I think we kind of live in this time right now. Vocabulary has become very blasé, and it, you know, we're very sarcastic, and I'm thinking about, you know, how we say things with hyperbole that we know we don't mean to that extent. You know, I mean, it's unfortunate. I think we have to be really careful with this, but like you know, all the suicide talk that we have nowadays, you know, and it's just rolling off, you know, the tongue, and it's hyperbole. It's an exaggeration. You know, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I wish I could die. No, we're not to that level, but that's how we express ourselves. And the more sarcastic and the more hyperbole we put into it, you know, the more humorous it is to us. And we do that with love. You know, I think we've taken that word, and we've kind of with our language as a whole, but with, you know, with that type of strong emotion, you know, used it in a way that obviously we don't have the same level of interest in these things as we do in the things that we truly love, but we just use that language all over the place.
So do you think is it just the language that we like to, is it strictly this exaggerated kind of behavior we've established, or do you think it's because we don't actually understand what it means to love? You know, we may think, okay, love is a feeling. I feel good about milkshakes. I feel good about my wife. I must love both.
Right.
And, you know,
that's true. And yeah, you know, C.S. Lewis wrote, you know, the book, The Four Loves, or, you know, he talks about the four loves, and, you know, whether it's a level or whether it's a type and a distinction between affections, you know, there's definitely, you know, in our English vocabulary, we don't have very many distinctions. You know, we don't have a language or a vocabulary. And so everything that we like, yeah, we associate that feeling. And that, I think, is one of our big problems, because, I mean, if you know, we're stymied by that. You know, if we have strong affections for somebody, it's almost impossible in our culture right now. I would even go so far as to say, you know, we hypersexualize things. It's like if we have a deep and abiding passion for someone or something, well, we automatically take that to mean some kind of physical attraction, and that's not what has to be going on here. But we're so confused because we don't know. I think you're exactly right. We don't know what it means to really have an agape love for things or for people, you know and we're missing out.
Yeah. So when we think about love and we think about what that means and what it means to have that as part of good fruit, because we want to be fruitful, we want to be good stewards, we want to be of our life, we want to be like Christ. If we wear the name Christian, we're saying I'm like Christ. So how did Christ love? And I can't help, and I mentioned this in the Thursday 3 video, I can't help but think of when he was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he
Hmm.
gave those two answers really by saying, well, the first one is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And then the second's like it, love your neighbor as yourself. So as we look at these two tonight over the next a few minutes, when it means to love God, if we don't understand what love really is, how
Mm.
can we understand how to love God? And before you get there, I heard this put it this way, where someone said, God is love,
Right.
but is love God? And does it go both ways? Because God is what it, God is what love is, and sometimes we have to understand that and define love through the lenses of who God really is. And I think that might help our discussion.
Yeah, I think it's a good distinction to make because describing the attributes of God, God is love. He is the perfect embodiment of love. But our concept of love does not encapsulate everything that God is. I think that that's the way that we look at those two properties is God is the embodiment of all good love, and that's love that is disciplinary, that's love that is compassionate, that's love that is gracious, that's love that is sacrificial, but it's also love that is jealous. Because God loves us so deeply as His creation, He is jealous over us, and that's why He demands for us to be faithful, to Him. I mean, if you talk about God's love, and you look in the Old Testament, there's that marriage relationship, Hosea and Gomer, those kinds of passages where, yeah, God loves us and gave us everything and expects faithfulness. God has been faithful to us. We need to be faithful to Him. If we don't even know what love is, if we just think it's this up and down emotional, you know, feeling, boy, it's going to be really hard for us to love it. Isn't that what John says too? I was thinking about that when you were saying it. John even says, how can you say you love God who you've never seen if you can't even love your brother? If you hate your
Yeah.
brother, if you've got these problems in your human relationships, don't sit around and say you love God because you're missing the point.
And that's kind of why I think Jesus mentioned those two things.
Right. Absolutely.
And they were trying to go, well, who's my neighbor? And I think the question was not who do I have to love? The question
Right.
was, who do I not have to love? That's what they were
Exactly.
really asking.
Who can
And
I leave on the outside?
yeah, and he goes, if you can't love others, then how in the world can you expect to love God? I mean, because God is love.
Right.
If you do, you can't know God. Caleb here said that God's love is so powerful it's hard to comprehend, and that goes back to what you said about the oh my goodness, the Hosea, and where that you read that and you're going, this is
Man,
crazy.
that's
It's
strong.
a crazy story, but then it's a direct parallel to what God wants for us. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get you back, even
Hmm.
though our actions don't deserve it, but we're worth it. And I think there has to be a distinction. God said, "You're worth it because I placed that value on you." Now your
Hmm.
actions, you don't deserve my forgiveness, but we're worth something. And I think and we're worth and we're valuable because of what He's done for us.
I think that's an important point to make about love. That's one of the things C.S. Lewis brings out. If you look into those, those four different Greek words for love, and I know that the scholarship now talks about how in a lot of ways they're interchangeable, but there are still, four different words, for love. And I think part of the distinctions between them sometimes is sometimes we love something because it does something for us or it gives us something. We want, that's that. I love milkshakes. I love milkshakes because they taste good. They do something for me that I like,
Yeah.
but then there is an inherent, I love something not because it does something for me, but because of what it is to me. Like family, you don't get to pick your family, but we may not always like the people in our family, but then there's that, or should be, that deep and abiding love for them, not because they bring anything to the table, not because they offer us anything necessarily, but just because of who they are to us. We love them, you know? And so I think we grow through those stages of love, and learn to have an appreciation and a value for something, whether or not it does anything for us. And that can be where it gets really tricky to show love to our neighbor who is everybody, even if I don't like everybody.
And I think that the thing that can help us do that is remembering that we were all made in the image of God.
Right.
And and that gets back to, how can you say I love God when you don't love this person and they're made in my image?
Right.
Now,
they're carrying me in them.
and that's a huge distinction, and it comes to the point where we have to be willing to love so deeply, just like God did. And when it comes to loving God, and I think of what we typically think, and God, Jesus was saying, no, if you believe in me and you love me, he goes, you will do the things I do, you will obey my commandments.
Right.
So is love, when it comes to our relationship with God, is it just primarily a transaction, obedience, love, and we get heaven? Is that kind of
right.
how we view love with God?
Yeah, I think that's that basic love we were just talking about. If all you do is love God for what you're going to get out of it, you've missed the point.
Yeah.
That's not what love is. I mean, let's think about God's love for us. What does God get out of loving us? And the truth of the matter is, there's not a whole lot we add to God. It's not like God was sitting around and he's so lonely that he needs us to love him. That's not the way that it works. But his love, um, his love drew him to creation. It
Yeah.
wasn't because he needed to make us in order to complete himself. He's complete. The Father, Son, and the Spirit, they're taken care of. They're good. But his love was a creative love. It was a love that wanted to see beauty and create something that could share that love, not because he gains anything by it, but because it is a joy for him to be able to see us benefit from it. And so we have to learn to get past that as well. To learn, I think, we go through those stages in our lives. At first, I'm going to be a Christian. I'm going to obey the rules because I don't want to be punished in hell. I don't want to have bad things happen to me. So I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. Well, that's maybe a good starting point, but we want to go past that, right? We want to get to the point where we say, it's not just that I want to avoid hell. I'm going to be a Christian so that I can get to go and be in heaven. I want to experience the reward, and I want to experience the joy and the greatness that's waiting in heaven. And that's great. And that's true. But then I think there's a third, level that we try to get to, right? It's not just about, I'm going to behave so I get rewarded. It's, I long to be like God.
Yep.
God loved me, and this is how God treated me.
Transformation.
I'm going to turn around, and I'm going to do that as well.
And I think, and when I think about this question, I couldn't help but think of Psalm 1. When David's writing here, and he says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the way of the counsel." Not in the counsel of the wicked.
Counsel of the young.
Yeah. Nor stands in the way of sinners, nor seats in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and he meditates on it day and night. It's not so it's saying he enjoys it. And,
right.
When's the last time we were like, I can't wait to do something? Well, when we think about that, what can't you wait to do? Well, leave the house. I can't wait to go somewhere without having to avoid people.
Right.
I want to be able to go and just be with people, and sometimes you'll see, I was at the grocery store pushing, looking for, soap and cleaning supplies. And I went down an aisle that someone else was on, and she started casually backing up, trying to like not look like she was backing up.
Right,
But
right.
that's what we do, and I
Yeah.
can't wait for that to be over. But that's not the same desire that I should have for desiring to be with God or desiring to
Hmm.
be like God. And then as we do that and remember that people are made in His image and we are loving Him, like you said, we have to love others. Just like John said, if you don't love others, we can't know God. So
Well, think
what's that
about it
look
in
like?
terms, think about that in terms of just the passage that we're looking at with fruit of the spirit. That's Galatians 5.
Yeah,
And the opening section there, but it's going to talk about the fruit of the spirit. Before that, it talks about the works of the flesh. So it's setting up this dichotomy, right? You can
yep,
go one of two ways. How does that section start? In verse 16, walk by the spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. So we know that the flesh has its desires, and the works
yep,
of the flesh are following the desires of the flesh. But the same thing, verse 17, the desires of the flesh are against the spirit, and the desires of the spirit are against the flesh. So there is an aspect of desire that's being infused into this. God didn't make us robots. He's not just looking for mindless obedience, or obedience for the sake of reward. He's wanting that transformation within us to long for the things of God, because I mean, what does Jesus say in the Sermon on the Mount? Don't store up your treasures here on earth,
yeah,
right? Not where, because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Bible talks an awful lot about our heart and what our heart is doing, and it's not enough just to have knowledge. I think that desire and that longing goes into the core of what God's asking us to do. Even in Proverbs, when it says, I'm thinking about heart now, I'm getting off track, but as a man thinks in his what? In his heart, so is he. So that, yeah, there's knowledge there, but if that knowledge doesn't make its way down into our core, into our heart, into what we desire, what we long for, and what we love, there's a whole lot of stuff I know up here, and I still have trouble doing it.
yeah.
There's not much stuff down here that I desire that I don't find time to do. You know what I'm
Absolutely.
saying? And there's a difference.
And I keep using this with our teenagers in a class that I'm doing at a Christian academy when I talk about knowledge versus desire, knowledge versus action. And coming to
Mm-hmm.
faith, there is no such thing as an I guess an actionless faith.
Right.
That there's no such thing.
Faith
And
without works.
there is no faith without works. And but when it comes to something like going back to my milkshake thing, I love milkshakes so much. See, there we go. I desire milkshakes so much. I could eat or drink as many of them in one sitting as you lay in front of me.
Right.
And I also know that if I want to get back in shape,
Mm.
that I shouldn't drink milkshakes. And if I keep drinking milkshakes and I expect to get in shape, what would you call me? And I keep using this every show almost because it seems applicable. You would say you're foolish because you're
Right.
not acting this, and I know up here what to do, but I don't desire it enough. There's no motivation. If I don't desire to love someone, I may know I'm supposed to.
Right.
But if I can't find the time to view them as the image of God, to view them important enough, then that's the thing. I like what
Mm.
Josh said here. He said, I have a hard time longing for the things my wife wants. And what she wants requires much less sacrifice than what God wants.
Good point. That's a very good point. That honeydew list, or things in that nature. And it's like, I've got to give up an awful lot. That fits in really well with what I was just thinking about. So does that mean that we don't do something if we're not passionate about it? I don't feel like going to worship today. So if I don't love it, if I don't long for it, if I don't desire it, then it's just better for me not to go. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's the
No,
right attitude. I
of course
think
not.
sometimes there is truth to, sometimes you have to fake it to make it. I do think there are times when we have to recognize we have a responsibility to do things no matter how we feel about it. But at the same time, our goal is to create that longing, and sometimes our habits have to carry us to that point. And we're going through the motions for a little while. But you know what they say about, smiling. If you're in a bad mood, if you smile, it has a chemical reaction that changes your mood. You can affect your disposition by doing things that make you look and seem more happy and excited. And then next thing you know, you feel better. And so it
Yeah.
can have an effect on us.
And I think that gets back to something that you and I discussed before we got on, which is I have to be willing to make sure my preferences never trump my relationship with others. If I say, sure, I desire to have a good relationship with you, Adam, but right now my personal preference is something completely different, and I know it might offend you, and I know it might hurt you, but I'm not willing to give up that preference.
Right.
That's a problem. And
that's
I think
the exact opposite.
We see that with churches and church members. Here's my personal preference, and even though I may have every right to do it, if it's going to offend you, maybe I don't have that right anymore. Now,
right.
we can take that too far. Well, I don't like the color red. Okay, well, we have red carpet. Get over it. We don't have red carpet here, by the way. But, there's some things that obviously we can't use. We could take too far. But if I can do something about it, and,
right.
My preference, we have to maybe be willing to let go of some of those things to help serve others. Like what Colin here said, and Rachel shouted out to us. Hi, Rachel. Yeah. And Colin said, love is more than just an idea of or a feeling of. He goes, love is a sacrificial love. It's an act of service. And I like what he said. It's an act of service. It requires, service requires you to give up something. If service benefits you in the sense of you're getting something besides maybe that reward of just, I guess, of being more like Christ. But if you're serving others to be rewarded, then that's more what I would call networking. That you're no longer selfish. You're no longer serving. Love is an act of service. Right. He goes, love is loving God even when we are in a season. I like that. Even when we're in a season. Like you said. And there's been plenty of things that I've been like, I really don't want to do this. And then about 5 minutes into it, I'm like, man, this isn't too bad.
I'm glad I knew that I needed to do this. Yeah, absolutely.
And he goes, Jesus loved us so much that he didn't call all those angels down to cancel God's plan. And I can remember that, which is sometimes why desire needs to be there, but even when it's not, we have to be willing to do what Jesus did and said, not my will, but your will. Our will has to become his will if we want to love God. And sometimes, I'm sorry, you had something.
Well, I think he understood something, according to Hebrews 12, he was looking beyond the cross. He knew he was making a trade-off, and however, there's a couple different ways to translate Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 2 when it talks about the joy that was put before Jesus. But regardless, it's like, okay, you can choose to walk away from this right now for some momentary escapism, or you can look beyond that and despise the shame that's coming, because obviously he didn't desire the cross, but he desired the result of the cross so much that he was willing to put in that that sacrifice. He was willing to do that. In the material I use for pre-marriage counseling, there's this great quote that says, love is first something that you feel, then it's something that you do, and then it's something that you are. Love isn't just a set of motions. Love isn't just a set of emotions. Love should become, once we get to its full development, become a part of who we are at our core.
Absolutely. And I know that a lot of times when we talk about love, we always go to the love chapter in 1 Corinthians.
1 Corinthians 13.
Yeah, we have to go there. And this
but
is
it's
why
good.
It is good. And sometimes I try to go other places so it's not so overused. But when we're talking about love being not just a feeling, I've challenged our teenagers to do this. And I said, I want you to go read 1 Corinthians 13. and I want you to find me one description that comes naturally. And I said some of you might be, naturally more, I guess, inclined to be patient than others. But I want you to
Right.
find me one of these descriptions that's just a natural instinct of human beings.
Right.
It's not a feeling. It's something we decide. I'm going to be patient, and I don't think we can say I'm patient until that's been tested.
Right.
I love them because I'm always patient with them. Okay, well, that moment when that patience tested, now you decide whether or not you're going to show love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the distinction. Is it's not just I like what you said. It's something that you feel, something you do, something you become, or that you are. At first it's easy to be patient with your girlfriend because you're sweet, the puppy love, and then as it gets to the end, or I guess the middle, the hard part, then all of a sudden, hold up. That little thing you thought was cute is no longer cute anymore. Now it's annoying.
Right.
And now you have to decide, am I going to be patient?
That's
And
the trouble with love. Love, and that's where Paul takes it in 1 Corinthians 13.
yeah.
Now abide faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. Why is love the greatest? Why is love so important? And I think the last of those traits that he gives in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is what makes it so unbelievable and so much more powerful than we give it credit for. We have turned it into this Valentine's Day cute crush, puppy love kind of emotional thing. But love is the most transformative power on this earth. I believe that with every core of my being.
Mm-hmm.
If we truly develop a love for something or someone, then it affects us to our atomic level. And the last thing Paul says about love in 1 Corinthians 13 is, prophecies are going to cease. Tongues are going to go away. All these things have an expiration date, but love never ends.
Yeah.
Love never fails. And that's what grips me when I think about why love is so significant in the scriptures, is because I can't walk away from that. I can't just turn around and shut that off. True agape, compassionate, sacrificial love is not something that I can just decide one day, I'm not going to do that anymore, because that's not love.
No, it's not. And I've heard this being done before, and I've mentioned it once to a class I did. But Josh mentioned in this chat that he goes I missed this part when I first read it. He said as a form of discipline, and this is that sounds interesting. As a form of discipline, he goes his dad once made him write 1 Corinthians out, replacing his name in the place of love. And I've heard
He
it
must
being
have
done as a challenge, but
right. He must have been a jerk to somebody, and his
I'm
dad
kind
was
of
like,
curious what he did. And Josh,
yeah.
if you can, you might tell us if you can't tell us that I get that, but that's a hard challenge to do. I've heard someone saying I want you to read with your name in place of love, and stop whenever it's not true and see how far you get. Well,
Right.
for some of us like myself, I don't get past patient.
It's
I'm
tough.
like,
It's
I'm
tough.
done, and
Yeah.
that's
It's
challenging.
beautiful to me to do that. The first exercise I like to do is put God in place of love, because God
Yep,
is love. And so you read through that and you realize this is how God views this relationship. Then, with that understanding, you turn it around and you say, all right, now put my name in there and see how much of that is true. What do I need to work on so that I can be more loving and so that I can be more like God? And that's
definitely.
a challenge.
Yeah, and my mom chimed in here, and she said, "Consider others better than yourself." In that passage, and when I
Absolutely.
read that, I can't help but think, because I always heard my mom say this. She was always, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with one another, and
Romans
that
12.
echoed in my head all the time, because it was
Yep.
always, but you don't understand. Here's what they did, and here's why I did it, and
I,
never flew with her
no,
for some
that's
reason.
it. Smart
And
lady.
yeah,
Right.
she said, if I can consider others more important than myself, She goes, I'm a loving person, and I can show that to everyone. It's not always easy, and the motivation comes from loving God and wanting to please Him. And I think that's what, my motivation should be wanting to please Him, but also wanting to become like Jesus.
Right.
And that's kind of our ultimate goal. And as we wrap up this thought on love, I think that's kind of helps us draw to a conclusion of love is wanting to please Him. Love is wanting to become like Him. And that means, like you said, something we first feel, do, and become. God is love. And if we want to be like Him, we have to eventually get to the part where where we become like God.
You just read something, didn't you?
I did. Rachel.
Oh, dear.
But you just don't understand.
You just don't understand.
It's
also, good to have friends.
I hear that echoing in my head now. Definitely.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up? Before we close on what we've been discussing?
The way that you talk about, being like God, probably for me, the best study I ever did on love came in 2 Peter chapter 1, where, Peter talks in verses 5-7 about here are the steps that we need to take to be fruitful in the kingdom and to understand who we are and become what God wants us to become. And it starts with, faith. And so add to your faith virtue. And it's all these add to. And it builds all the way up. And then the top of that food chain, the top of that staircase. And I see that as us getting closer and closer to God and being like God, because it says earlier in chapter 1, that we have been given all things that pertain to life and godliness. So here's how you live your life. Here's how you become godly. You ascend through these characteristics and you work on them in your life. And the final one after brotherly kindness is love, and I see that as a drawing near to God. The closer you get to God, think about all the people in the Old Testament who had encounters with God. Moses at the burning bush and the people at Mount Sinai and all these other occasions where they are surrounded and engulfed in this presence, and it changes them. Moses comes down from Mount Sinai and he literally glows. He's radioactive from being so close to God. If I get that close to God in my life, it's going to change me. If I get that close to love and I learn how to possess that kind of love and then turn around and share that kind of love, it will transform me beyond anything I can imagine.
Absolutely. Well, Adam, thanks for joining us. And don't log off. We're just going to end it, and we'll stay on for a little bit. But I'm excited, and Adam, it's been real fun, and but it is time for us to go. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Thanks for everybody in the Facebook live chat for participating. We've had a lot of fun. Remember to join on here on Crossways every Thursday at the same time, 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. That's our new time. Crossways, as always, brought to you by Holly Hill Church of Christ and Adventures in Ministry. Adventures in Ministry is a great resource. If you guys don't know about it, check it out. We got lots of resources on there, but for the time being, there's the app with lots of songs. And I know some things are changing. I've been plugging this in. You've been hearing some stuff. You've been seeing some things change. In about 2 weeks, we have some big news. And I can't tell you what that is, but it's going to be big. And so stay tuned for that. And remember, until next time, make sure you represent Christ in everything you do. And we can together become more like Him.